Hello and welcome back to Realonomics. My name is Kareem and today I'm going to be discussing why house prices are so damned high and why I think that might be about to change. Now, for house prices to rise relentlessly as they have been doing, you have to have two conditions. Firstly, you have to have excess demand, lots of buyers, and secondly, those buyers all have to be able to get sufficient finance in order to be able to bid prices higher. So let's start off by looking at the supply and demand picture. If, for instance, in a town you had 1,000 sellers and only one buyer, well, nobody likes to cut their price, but eventually those sellers are going to have to cut their selling price in order to be the one to attract the buyer. And the same works in reverse. If you've got 1,000 buyers and only one seller, well, those 1,000 buyers are pretty soon going to start outbidding each other, and eventually the person that bids the highest will win the house. So if prices are rising, by definition then there must be excess demand. So the question is, where's it coming from? It's often said that we're not building enough houses in the UK. But as this chart from the BCIS shows, we actually added an average of 210,000 new dwellings a year for the last 20 years. That's the equivalent of 4.2 million new homes that we've built since 2005. Now, each dwelling houses 2.4 people. So we've actually built enough extra housing to home an additional 504,000 people each year for the last 20 years. So when people say, well, we're just not building enough houses, it's a pretty strange claim. We've been building loads of houses. So if prices are still rising, then that can only mean one thing, which is that the population has been growing faster than the housing stock. So what's been causing that? Well, very often people will suggest it's the birth rate. We're just having too many babies. But again, this just isn't true. The data doesn't bear the claim out. As you can see, if you do a quick Google search, the birth rate has fallen to 1.4 children per woman. Now, the replacement rate is around 2.1. So a birth rate of 1.4 represents a rapidly declining population. In fact, each generation will be 2/3 the size of the previous generation. That is a precipitous population collapse. Maybe it's longevity then, people are living longer, and that in itself will increase the size of the population if people aren't dying. Well, that's not true either. As you can see from this chart, if you look at the section to the top right, it's flat. Life expectancy hasn't increased in the UK since about 2011. It seems that life expectancy never recovered from the great financial crisis. So that only leaves one possible explanation, and that's immigration. According to ONS figures, that's the Office for National Statistics, net migration has been averaging around 250,000 per year since the early 2000s. That's a new city the size of Luton or Northampton that we would have to build every single year just to keep up. Then we had the Boris wave, where after Boris Johnson becoming Prime Minister, net migration rose to 900,000 a year for 2 years. That's 2 new cities the size of Liverpool that we would have to build just to not fall any further behind. With such high net migration over a sustained period, it's no surprise, therefore, that we have a shortage of houses. Now, as an aside, if we're building enough houses for 504,000 people per year, but net migration is only running at 250,000 people per year, then over 20 years we should actually have had 2.2 million empty homes. But we don't. So this suggests that there's something seriously wrong with the data here. Now, I would suggest that it's not on the housing side. It's very easy to count the number of new houses that we're building because houses don't move around and they can't hide. So it suggests that the ONS data is seriously undercounting the real net migration figures. But anyway, let's move on and look at the other side of the picture, which is the finance, because even if you have excess demand, then those buyers still have to have sufficient money available to be able to bid house prices higher. And given that many buyers need a mortgage to buy their home, we then have to start to look at the role of banks. Financial deregulation in the UK began in the mid-1970s, and it accelerated in the 1980s under Margaret Thatcher. Prior to that, only building societies were allowed to lend mortgages, and building societies were not allowed to create new money when they made loans. This meant that building societies could only lend money that had first been deposited with them by another customer, and that meant that the amount of money available to chase houses was very stable, which led to house prices remaining very stable at 3 times the average income. Now, Thatcher argued that increased competition in the mortgage market would lead to better mortgage deals for borrowers, so she opened up the mortgage market to banks. But instead of the competition leading to better mortgage deals for buyers, what actually happened was that we got this inexorable competition for the last 40 years to bid house prices ever higher. Now, the banks don't mind this because high house prices equals bigger mortgages, and bigger mortgages equals bigger profits. And what do bigger profits make? Why, if you're a banking executive, bigger profits make bigger bonuses. So the banks have been doing very nicely out of this boom in house prices, whereas the likes of you and I have been saddled with the prospect of having to work for the rest of our lives to pay off these ever larger loans. Now, banks love mortgage lending because it's easy and safe to do. In all honesty, a teenager could run a mortgage book because somebody applies to you to borrow money to buy a house. It takes you a few minutes to work out, well, does their salary cover the repayments on this loan? And if we have to repossess the house, will it cover the outstanding balance of the loan? You can establish that in a few minutes. And so it's an easy decision to make. Whereas banks hate lending to businesses because it's inherently risky and it's difficult to do. Somebody comes to you and they want to borrow £1 million to, start up a new business selling widgets. How do you know, as a banker, that this business idea will be a success? You don't. In fact, what you're acutely aware of is the high proportion of businesses that fail within the first 3 years. And if you lend money to one of those businesses that fails, then you, the bank, is on the hook for a very large loss, large enough that it could even threaten the existence of your bank. Since deregulation, mortgages rapidly became the largest sector of bank lending in the UK. And this relentless tide of new money entering the housing market drove prices higher and higher until we end up where we are today, where most people are looking at the housing market wondering how they will ever be able to afford a home. Now, this issue is incredibly important because high house prices have led to that falling birth rate that we talked about earlier. The average age of a first-time buyer is now 36. People are living with their parents into their 30s so that they can try and save up some money so that one day maybe they'll be able to afford their own home. The result of this is that people are delaying getting married, forming a household and having children for so long that in many cases they never have children at all, hence the plummeting birth rate. The relentless increase in house prices, driven by both immigration and bank lending, have literally become an existential threat to society. This has to change. Something that cannot continue forever will not continue forever. Either we address the situation or we will sleepwalk into a disaster. We really only have 2 options, and I think we have to do both of them. One of which is to end population growth, and the second is that the government can use its power over the banks to force them to reduce their lending for house purchases. This is a policy known as credit guidance, and it's what lay behind the Japanese post-war economic miracle. It's also what lay behind the success of South Korea and Taiwan and made them into manufacturing giants, and it also underpins China's success today. Now, under credit guidance, the government can simply say to banks, we want you to not grow your mortgage lending this year, and we want you to grow your lending to productive businesses by, let's say, 5%. And the result of that is we'll get more growth of productive businesses and we'll get less growth of house prices. That sounds like a win-win to me. Now, here's the good news. There is, in the real estate data, going back 200 years, and it can be found in multiple different countries, a regular cycle of real estate values going up for 14 years and then crashing and remaining either down or flat for about 4 years. And it's illustrated in this chart that's on the screen now. It's been written about at length by authors such as Fred Harrison, Phil Anderson, or Akhil Patel. You can find their books on shepherdwalwyn.com. And this real estate cycle exists in the data. This is purely an empirical finding. And if I had to bet, then I would bet on the real estate cycle repeating itself at least one more time. In fact, I think the early warning signs are already here. We've seen over the last few months, for example, Bitcoin falling even while gold and other commodities have been going up. We've also seen in the news multiple construction companies going into liquidation, including AJ Taylor & Sons, Coldwell, Artemis, and numerous others. You only have to Google it, and you'll find plenty of examples. We also see recently in the news private credit firms like First Brands are going bust, and even the giants like BlackRock have had to limit redemptions out of their private credit funds. UK mortgage lender Market Financial Solutions also just went bust, and this has had knock-on effects throughout the financial system. For instance, Barclays, who loaned money to MFC, have seen their share price take a 4.2% hit because of that. The UK housing market has been stalling, and the US housing market is also on its knees, with demand for houses hitting the lowest ever levels. And all of this was before America attacked Iran, which is leading to a rapid acceleration in oil prices, which will have a knock-on effect on all economies in the world. So it seems very likely now that we are facing a recession, a housing market crash, and quite possibly a financial crisis. And my prediction is for that to happen sometime this year, if not into the first half of next year. So if you're looking to buy a house at some point, I would say that the next 2 to 4 years should provide a great buying opportunity for you. So my advice to you would be work some extra hours, get a second job if you can, save hard, cut your spending, because if you spend everything you earn, you end up no better off. Get some advice on how to improve your credit rating, and in short, get yourself into as good a financial position as you can, ready to buy. Because once those lower prices are here, you'll want to take advantage of them. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please like and subscribe. In the next video, I'm going to be talking about why rents are higher, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.